I want to talk about that AAA initiative, huh? I literally, it just ended basically like 10, 20 minutes ago. I want to talk about it. I'm gonna play, there was Don't Starve, I'm gonna play Chef. Default Chef. Yeah, I don't have Chef stuff unlocked. Cry about it. I'm not gonna play Monsoon, because I gotta talk while I'm playing, and I'm not good at that. I haven't made videos before. I have a few that I'm starting to make and actually script and stuff, but I just want to get some ramblings out first. I mean, one of the videos I'm making is going to be on games getting new content, and the way that, new content is generally good for a game, but obviously it's not always good. Not just because of content bloat, power creep, or whatever, but also just because, like, vibes change sometimes, and sometimes it's not great when you add... I mean, power creep is a thing that this game experiences. Like, Chef is crazy shit. Chef is an example of maybe not the most power creep, but, like, this is longer range than Artie's flamethrower, and you can use it while sprinting and shit. More than anything, though, the items are probably power creep, but okay, let's see. New DLC. I don't really want to talk about power creep. That's for another video. The new DLC looks, honestly, really nice looking. I don't doubt Gearbox at this point that they can make really good content. They've evidently shown that, like, Secret of the Storm was just a fuck up because they were rushed, and they were in the middle of, like, changing the code base entirely to match to basically just match between PC, console, and everything. So they got kind of fucked up in the middle of that, right? I don't really blame them. And Allied Collective was fantastic. I think this DLC is going to have really quality content, and it's going to be fun. So is there any issue I have with it? Not really with the DLC in specific, but just the fact that the game is going to keep getting DLCs. It's like, okay, we're strapped in for the ride, huh? We're just going to keep getting new content, right? No changes to existing content, no rebalancing. People might say, oh, why balance? Why would you nerf things? Oh, it's a single-player game. Who cares if it's unbalanced? And, I would partially agree, especially with a roguelike. A game like Risk of Rain, your whole thing is the power fantasy of getting powerful. But, usually you have to, like, put in some level of work in a video game to then get to that level of power where you can start to be like, oh, I love how powerful I am. This is so awesome. But with, like, DLC content, it feels a lot easier to get more powerful, to the point where, honestly, Rainstorm feels kind of like Drizzle to me, but that is partially just that I've played the game a lot. So I think, more than power creep, it's also just... the main thing isn't, oh, the new items are better, but also the fact that they're just not going to touch old content, really. I appreciate that they always make the new monsters and stuff also spawn on old stages. It's not like children only spawn on Helm and Thatchery or whatever, or on the Path of the Colossus. It wouldn't make sense, like, if they just didn't have children on the same stage as parents, right? That'd be something I'd expect to see another game do, though. Minecraft would do that. They would add children and then forget to put them into the places where parents are. Or not forget, but they just can't. They just can't focus on, there's no time to. I remember the community manager for Risk of Rain actually saying that their idea right now is basically just don't touch the old Hopu Games era content. No particular reason given, but I can imagine the reason is that there would be backlash if they touched it too heavily. And yeah, that's pretty obvious. I understand why you don't want to touch old content. But, like, it ends up creating a dissonance, right? There ends up being a dissonance in quality. I think this is what we're finally going to be seeing more clearly than ever. Something that I think a lot of games have already reached. Minecraft, even Terraria, Terraria, look at its new furniture sets. They're just sprited so much better. But obviously they're not going to resprite the old stuff. And perhaps even more than that, even when they do change old things in Terraria, I think the art style changes in terms of them using more shader effects to make weapons look cooler. It makes things feel different, And I'm not going to be like, oh, old Terraria was better. I wish when things looked clunkier and more boring. I might say that with Minecraft just because that's my personal preference, but I'm not going to be like, oh, it's objectively worse now. No, what is objectively bad is just the fact that it's inconsistent. And that's why I like Don't Starve Elsewhere. Don't Starve Elsewhere, they've been pumping Don't Starve together with lots of new content. they've been doing what Risk of Rain is doing, basically, except free content. But it's still DLC coded, right? You know, like, it's not literally DLC, but it's built like DLC. Do you get what I mean? That they build the content like... It's better quality, it's more ambitious, it's a little power crept, and they don't... I don't know that much about I know a lot about Risk of Rain content, but I don't know that much about Don't Starve content, because I'm not someone who plays the game super deep into the late game, or like even who plays it that often. But I do know that what a lot of games tend to do is they just add new content, they ignore the old stuff. I'm not even saying like, oh, buff everything, every old item. Like, yeah, there's a lot of items in this game. I know it would open up a rabbit hole, but like, you have really bad items in this game. Obviously, everyone thinks of bison steak, right? And, I mean, did they technically buff it? Yeah, they did technically, in some sense, buff it by adding a recipe for steered steak. But that just shows more of how games kind of have to... It's not like they have to... Well, okay. In, like, Minecraft and Risk of Rain's case, I think they kind of have to, because my conspiracy that I have evidence for, because I have seen a lot of Minecraft developers, both ex-developers and current developers, talk about the game, is that they just can't. They can't really update old things unless they have a good reason to. I mean, see drone AI in this game, right? Drone AI used to suck ass, and drones just in general weren't good. But they fixed those. They made those better. They made drones better in the DLC where they added new drones. You get what I mean? They had to find a reason to. If they just wanted to update drones, make their AI better for funsies, just because it would be a good thing for the game, they can't do that. They had to do a drone-centric DLC, right? You know, and like Minecraft, if they want to add more wolf variants and more, like, you know, add wolf armor, they have to tie it to a brand new flashy feature. They like, well, like armadillos. That's kind of why they have to throw random things together. Like now they're adding physics balls, which totally could have just been slime. But no, they're adding a new type of slime to be the physics ball. Because it has to be something marketable. And that's kind of a bit of a shame. So I guess there's two things I really want to talk about. I'm really talking messily. There's a reason I want to have scripted videos, but I really want to get out my thoughts in an unscripted way. I think the main two things are just the game's style changing over time, and the game just kind of ignoring old stuff and leaving it to rot in comparison to the new stuff. I mean, look at the new stages in the new Risk of Rain DLC trailer. They don't look... They look gorgeous, but they don't look like the same as, you know, Distant Roost or anything. That isn't bad, it's just the developers want to make prettier looking stages, more impressive looking stages. That's not a bad thing, obviously. But it does mean there's gonna be... You can tell what DLC content is. And, you know, obviously... Okay, what, am I complaining that you can tell that the DLC content is DLC content? Maybe that's a bit stupid. I still don't think it's great to just keep piling a game full of DLC content and not addressing the issues in existing stuff. Like, overloading enemies, I remember hearing that, like, some of the Tofu developers wanted to update elites, like overloading and glacial, and make them more interesting to play around, instead of just having giant health pools and kind of weird gimmicks. But we're never gonna have them changed, are we? They're just gonna be, you know, I mean, they might add more elite types, they're more interesting. Mending in Survivors of the Void is a more interesting elite type, even if it's very basic. It's a priority target. If there's a mending enemy near the boss, then you want to try and kill it so that it doesn't heal the boss. But, you know, an elite type like overloading is kind of a little bit bullshit. I mean, admittedly, Void Touched is too, and they kind of are really similar. I think you could do with a lot of mixing up content as well. Like, remixing it, I guess, so to speak. You could change the tiers of a few items. Like, now that we have Sail Star, do we really need, like, shipping request form to also be a uncommon item? You know, maybe we could have make it into a red item and make it activate every time you hit teleporter. Give you legendary items or something. You know, there's temporary items now. I think that's a great example, actually. Temporary items are a great feature Valid Collective brought over from Risk of Rain Returns, but do I think there's going to be any use of temporary items in the future DLCs at all? No, I don't think there will be. I think you could do a lot of fun things, like add a new item that gives you 2 random temporary items when you pick it up or something. That could be interesting, or an equipment that spawns a bunch of temporary items. You know, you could do that, but they're not going to add that because it's not part of the DLC, and everything needs to be added together at the same time. You know, again, the kind of Minecraft way, or the... Like, if they want to buff stuff, they have to add it alongside new content. I really am just rambling and shit at this point. But, like, I have notes. What did I write down? I mean, I think Don't Starve Elsewhere is extremely smart because I think they've maybe they recognized that they're pumping the game with content, and eventually it's just going to be a little bit incohesive if they keep adding on to the same basis. It's like if you take Ship of Theseus, but instead of rebuilding every part, you just add on more parts to it. It's going to end up, like, sinking at some point. Maybe not sinking, but at least you're barely going to be able to see the original ship on the inside, and the original ship is probably not going to be able to hold the new stuff that you add that great. I know Don't Starve has been adding more combat-oriented stuff, while the core of Don't Starve was always kind of focused around, yes, combat is a thing you can do, but you probably shouldn't engage in combat that much, because you should probably just avoid things or set traps for them. So ideally in Don't Starve Elsewhere, they will, you know, do something with the combat. I'm a bit concerned seeing the trailer, the combat mostly looked the same. But to be honest, it's a very early look at it anyways, so I can see them changing the combat. Because, you know, if you want to have more emphasis on combat, then you're obviously going to want to change it, right? And I think Terraria 2 would be a good idea, because Terraria, you know, they've got a difference in vibe now, right? They used to just do Rule of Cool, I think, in Terraria, and they still do to some degree. You know, they don't worry about things not making sense. They'll add crossover content, they'll add things that are just absurd and stupid. I mean, they had poop, but now it's more of like silly than cool and wacky now. But it's also more thought out. Like, the Empress of Light has a role in the lore, I feel like, you know, more than a boss. Like, the Pumpkin Moon, the pumpkin doesn't really, is just kind of Halloween reference. Not really any sort of, like, doesn't really feel like it fits within a cohesive world that they're trying to build. It was just a thing they did for fun. So, you know, I think if Terraria kept adding new content, you'd probably be able to tell what, you know, the newer stuff would be more thought out. But at least they do change the old stuff, right? I do like that they rebalance old things, they update the textures of, like, Golem and stuff. Golem is more sun-themed, which fits in with Moonlord and stuff a bit better. Even if it's not perfect, it's still something. And, you know, Risk of Rain could go ahead and update, like, all the old stages' graphics to look better. I think that's probably the smartest thing for Minecraft to do, is to make the old mobs look better. Even though I like how all the mobs look right now, I'd say, you know. But I mean, the texture update. The texture update in Minecraft, I think, even if you don't like new textures, is probably a good thing in terms of, you know, the notion of having the textures not look like blatantly obvious. You can tell which ones are new, were added more recently, and which ones are the old-ass textures. You know. I just don't like when a game, I don't like when you can tell what is old and what's new. Is that just a weird picky thing of mine? Am I just picky as hell? I don't know. I think it's a reasonable ask for a game to feel not just good new content, but also, you know, stupid way to put this that I have in the script for one of my videos is, think about the base game as ABC, and the DLC, they're adding 1, 2, 3. You know, 1, 2, 3, I love 1, 2, 3. I love numbers, right? And I love ABC. I love letters. But, you know, you gotta ask not just if 1, 2, 3 is as good as ABC, or even better, but if ABC 1, 2, 3 as a whole, you know, like, this is a full. Is it cohesive? Does it make sense? Does it, you know, I think Minecraft tries to do that with, like, mechanics. You know, they add the camel, they try and make sure it's different from the llamas. But, I mean, whenever Minecraft adds new content, I also just get in the back of my mind a feeling of, wow, this content's really cool and awesome. if it is, which, to be honest, it most of the time is. But then there's always the nagging sense of, okay, but what about the things that really, really suck right now? What about the enchanting system? In Risk of Rain, that's like, okay, but what about the balancing of looping being incredibly overpowered? What about how trash some of the skills are for, like, Arrow Rain is way better, or way worse than Ballista. I think there's way too many skills in this game compared to Risk of Rain Returns, where one of them is better than the other one. Like, how come there's so many alternate skills that are just better or just worse, instead of being side grades or changing up your gameplay? That is something I really want them to do, is go change skills for the older survivors. Like, the newer survivors, you can feel Operator, all of Operator's skills, and I'd say most of Drifter's skills, feel like really good really well balanced. They're, you know, maybe they're powerful characters, but at least their skills feel more like gameplay choices, and less like, okay, I've got to pick the one that's better. Let's be honest, no one's going to be picking Flamethrower because they, like, on Artificer, unless they want to be having more fun, because Ion Surge might not be fun to them. But it sucks to be deliberately choosing something that is worse. I mean, it doesn't matter that much, right? It's a single-player game, ultimately. But balancing is still important. If balancing wasn't important, then, I mean, they could just add items that are all extremely overpowered. They could just make gasoline ignite like 5 times more enemies, right? Balancing matters. I feel like, I mean, this is another whole video I could make, and I might make, if enough people are like, why do you think balancing matters in single-player games? But I feel like it's at least understandable enough that I don't really need to make it a whole thing. Balancing matters in single-player games. Because what the fuck was that? Like, I know I'm on Rainstorm, but like, what the fuck was that? I know some characters might handle bosses better than others, and have weaknesses and strengths, but I don't really feel like Chef has that many weaknesses ever since they... I mean, it's funny because Chef was so incredibly trash when they added Chef early, but then they fixed Chef by making Chef as powerful as all the Survivors of the Void content, which I think is way too power crept. Look at this shit, like, this is not balanced. You can't tell me this is balanced. Yeah, I just took a bunch of fall damage, but... like... you gotta have some cohesion. I don't know, either nerf Chef, or like buff Commando's role to let you do that as well. I don't know. You know, it doesn't need to be... trying to reach perfect balance is a bit absurd, but you should try and have some things feel reasonably on the same level, or on the similar level. Alright, in terms of style, I think... yeah, the new stages are definitely going to look better than the base game stages, or even the other DLC stages, because the artists are getting better. And that's an interesting thing with game content that I'm not sure what to think of exactly. Even Stardew Valley, like, Ginger Island in Stardew Valley has so much better pixel art than the rest of the game because, well, Concerned Ape got better at pixel art. I mean, even nowadays, there's more people doing pixel art than just Concerned Ape, although it is mostly him. Obviously, that's a little inconsistent. I don't really, it does make Ginger Island feel special, the fact that it has a slightly different art style, more improved art style, but it's not really an intentional choice. It's just the fact that Concerned Ape got better and wanted to make better looking art. So, I appreciate old things being updated to, accordingly. But would I really want, like, Risk of Rain 2 to be super high fidelity or anything? No. I think Abandoned Aqueduct, I think this stage right here, right now, looks perfect. I think, if anything, they should downgrade the looks of the new stages, but, obviously that would make them look way less cool, right? So that's why I think making a new game is just a better idea, as hard as it is. It's a big ask to say, hey, just do what Don't Starve is doing, just make a brand new game. But I do think that's actually, like, the best option. Low-key? Because, again, I feel like your choices are either you kind of have a, inconsistent game. Hey, we're in Sulphur Pools. I think they mostly kept the style pretty well in Survivors of the Void. This looks mostly like, the base game content, but it looks a little better, right? It's not crazy. But if you keep pushing forward, which they are going to keep pushing forward, I think that just happens to all games. I mean, all media, really, like, fucking The Amazing Digital Circus. You know what? I've been watching that. And you can tell they got way better animation and texture quality. Like, it kind of almost makes you forget that it, like, I don't know, you could actually, maybe it's intentional, I don't know that much, but maybe it's intentional that it looks more like a, or less like a game than it did in the first episode, you know, the art style intentionally looking like an old PlayStation game or whatever, and now it doesn't, almost like you're forgetting that it's a game. But I feel like it's more so just that they realized that it would be nicer to make it look nicer. But obviously, you know, it does mean the first episode, the pilot, looks a little off in comparison. So, what am I really trying to say? I'm trying to say Don't Starve Elsewhere is a good idea, and I think the Risk of Rain DLC, Hallowed Concepts, will be good. But I will still have my gripes with Risk of Rain. It's not going to solve any of my issues with the game. It's just going to add more fun stuff. At the end of the day, I can't complain about that. It's more high quality, fun content. Alloy Collective stuff is really fun. And, I mean, most of the Secrets of the Storm stuff is really fun, I would say. I would imagine Hallowed Concepts content is going to be fun to play with. But fun to play with is only one aspect of a game, right? You know, new stuff is only one aspect of a game. Can you really just keep adding new things forever and ever without considering balancing, considering art style, considering just the core that you're developing the game on top of? I mean, Terraria can't even add any more liquids anymore if they want to. You know, what the fuck just happened? Okay. Yeah. I mean, if I quote what I just said to a friend, I'm gonna pause my game for a second and just read out what I said. Well, let's see. I think this will be the Minecraft 1.21 type scenario where I really enjoy the content, and I can tell they put a lot of thought into it, but it feels a little awkward getting more and more new content when it feels like the old content is sort of being left in the dust. And yeah, I mean, in the terms of Risk of Rain, that can mean different things. That can mean the old stages look different in comparison. That can mean the balancing of old characters is awkward. That can mean Voidling is a terrible final boss, and we all know that. But you know what's funny about Voidling, though? They added the Soulless Wing, new final boss. I mean, they could have plausibly spent all the effort for Soulless Wing on, you know, making Voidling better. But obviously they need to make DLC that sells, right? They need to make money, or else they're not going to be, like, funded and they're going to get fired and shit. So it kind of sucks they have to make new content, but I mean, I'm not gonna, you know, they do the best they can within the constraints of, you must make new content. That's the thing I think Minecraft is kind of stuck in. They kind of have to make new content. I don't know how I just bugged my... Okay, I swear I don't experience bugs in this game that often, but I think this is just what playing Chef is like. You know, I think Risk of Rain is not going to be ruined or anything. It's just not going to be improved. It's just going to be more of awesome stuff. But there's a lot of balancing confusion in this game. I don't think it really knows what it wants to do with, like, health items, and shield items are incredibly OP because how easily you can heal in this game compared to the first game. There's a whole different identity between Risk of Rain 1 and 2, but it feels like they add items without really considering that as much. I'm not sure how I feel. It's complicated. For Minecraft, I really think they'd have two options to pick. One is to just stop adding content that is actually better than the old content, which would kind of maybe be dumb. Or pull a Ship of Theseus and just rip out the old stuff and replace it with new stuff. You know, update everything old. And you do lose something, right? You lose something when you make everything old look better. If they made all the old mobs, you know, as well animated as the Sniffer or the Armadillo, you would lose something. But I feel like that might be a necessary thing to, you know, a necessary sacrifice to take on if you want the game to look consistent. Otherwise, you're just going to have a few mobs that look very clearly better animated than the other ones, and it's just kind of confusing to me. So, I mean, that's why I appreciate Don't Starve making a new game. They don't have to deal with, oh, do we pick Ship of Theseus route, or do we pick keep building on top of the old ship route? You don't need to decide between those two if you just make a new game. Obviously, it's not easy to just make a new game, but I would hope they at least consider Risk of Rain 3 for the future, because, yeah, DLC is going to make this game better. Maybe not better, but, like, DLC is going to be fun. I don't think DLC is going to, you know, it'll feel awkward. It'll eventually get pretty strange feeling just getting new content. It's an awkward feeling I get. Yay, content. I love the content. I love the new stuff. But what the hell are you going to do about Arrow Rain? What about how broken as hell Chef clearly is? What about Polyloot? What about Railgunner? What about... I think nerfs are very valuable. I think buffs are important too. I think sometimes just reworking something in a way that doesn't buff or nerf it is also important. And I think sometimes the content you want to make might not even fit within the, like, core basis of the game that you're working on. Again, Don't Starve, I think if they wanted to add more impressive, cool combat encounters, that wouldn't really work with the foundation that they have of Don't Starve together, because that's the foundation of Don't Starve. And again, they could potentially choose to just revamp the entire game, Ship of Theseus it, until it's a brand new game. Or they could just ignore doing any of that and just make the new content better than the old one, or like completely different than the old stuff. That's like the two questionable routes. Again, I know I keep repeating myself, but I just feel like I want to get my point clear, but this is an unscripted video. I don't know. I will enjoy the new Risk of Rain DLC whenever it comes out, but I'm not going to be happy about it. Does that make sense? I'm not going to be happy unless they change old stuff. And oh, what about Barrier? They rebalanced Aegis got a buff. Oh yeah, that's because they were adding Eclipse Light. They were adding Eclipse Light. That is the real reason that they buffed Barrier. Alright? The real reason they changed drone AI is because they were adding new drones. And I guess I can hope that within the confines of corporate decision-making, where they can only update things if it's relevant to something new, I guess I can hope that they're finding a clever way, that they find a clever way to, I don't know, change the way that health works. You know, because of a new item that interacts with health or something? I don't know. A new mechanic, a brand new mechanic that interacts with health, making them go, okay, we're revamping the way that healing and shit works. Maybe that's a dumb example, but, you know, I don't want to wait until they do the Huntress DLC or the Artificer DLC to finally go ahead and just give them, like, minor buffs and stuff. Also, can you stop flying away from me? I've never really understood the struggle people have with these things until now. But that's probably because I'm kind of brain off. Is my spiel done? I think my spiel will be done. I think there's a lot more to say that I want to say in an actual scripted thing, but I hope my point has maybe at least gotten across. I don't know. Please discuss. If you have anything to say, I want to address it in the next video that I make that is actually scripted and about the consequences of adding new content, the dissonance that can be created, both in terms of art style, in terms of balancing, and just in terms of vibe. It's like vibe creep, right? Not power creep, vibe creep. So, let me know what you think. I'm looking forward to the DLC, but I am going to be a little bit whiny about if they don't make any changes to existing content. You know what really bugs me, actually? Is that all the new stages have way more credits, which means they spawn more chests and everything, than the old stages. Like, if you want a good run in this game, you're better off to just reset until you get a DLC stage, because you're going to get more items. That is stupid. You should fix that inconsistency. It is a number change. It is a balancing change. You need to change numbers. Tweak numbers. Tweak little numbers. It's important. It's important, okay? Please. I mean, I could go on, but, like, they added variants. They added loop variants to stages, but have you ever noticed how all the loop variants are of DLC stages? Have you ever thought about that? Hmm? Probably just because it's efficient to work on, when you're working on the stage to also make a loop variant of it. Why would they make a loop variant of a stage they haven't worked on in ages? Logistically speaking, it makes sense. But consistently speaking, I would really like to see, a loop variant of Siren's Call or Abandoned Aqueduct or, you know, maybe not Abyssal Depths. Maybe I don't care about Abyssal Depths having a loop variant, but something, whatever. Oh my god, and I hate how the Halcyon Shrine always gives you way more Seekers of the Storm items than other items. Like, not only are the items power crept, but the Halcyon Shrine just gives you better items because the fact it gives you Seekers of the Storm items, like, that is extremely gimmicky. That is almost as gimmicky as, like, a Minecraft structure that only gives you new items. I kind of hate that trial chambers have hanging signs in their, like, supply chests instead of normal signs. Because, like, oh my god, one update ago you added hanging signs, and now you're, like, obsessed with hanging signs. And then I can also I also have something to say about hanging signs. They only ever added sign editing to Minecraft when they added hanging signs. That's that's my kind of my perfect example of what I mean by they have to wait for an efficient time to bundle together content. They can't just decide we're going to use development time on adding editing signs as a quality of life feature. No, we need to wait until we're already doing something with signs. Hanging signs, which is vaguely relevant to our theme of player expression in this update. Then, now that we're working on that, we can add editing signs by right-clicking them. Wow. And it's just like, oh my god, do we really... I don't like corporate priority shit. I like what Terraria does because they can just choose to do whatever the fuck they want to, because they're not tied down by trying to make stuff marketable. They're not tied down by needing to be super efficient with their usage of time and, like, the pipeline of content. Minecraft has, like, a pipeline of content that goes down, like, a whole year or two, and they generally can't really just throw something into the mix because that changes everything. So they can't just be like, yeah, you know what, this would be a good idea, let's do it. They had the idea to change the lodestone recipe to use an iron ingot instead of a netherite ingot, or at least just be cheaper in general, like 5 years before they actually changed it, because it just never came up, because they're always too focused on, they can't spread their focus everywhere. I understand that, but I think you should really try and improve things that are bad more than just add new things. But I understand the developers can't. The Risk of Rain developers also can't really do that. They can't just update Voidling. They have to sell the DLC. They have to add a new boss that does all the things they would have wanted Voidling to do. I know for a fact. I know. I can't. I have no proof, but I know that Solus Wing is just everything that they wanted Voidling to be, because of how old Voidling was going to be a boss that sat in the center of the arena, that had weak points you had to defeat first, and I mean, it has a sweeping laser just like Voidling. The heat vent attack might as well be a void fog attack, right? It's like Minecraft adding mangrove swamps and then not adding, like, or not changing swamps themselves at all. Is that really a swamp update? Did they really do a swamp update? No, they didn't do a swamp update. They added a new swamp. Yes, they put the frogs in the old swamp. That's fine. But, like, in 1.19, they added mud, and mud still doesn't spawn in swamps. You're adding sequels to content. You're just trying to shove things away under the rug. Say, don't look at Voidling, don't look at swamps, don't look at these things. Look at the new stuff that we're way more proud of. And I get that. And again, I've said this 1,000 times, but I understand that when you are being looked over by a corporate entity like Gearbox or Microsoft, you have to make things that are marketable, and you have to be efficient and not dilly-dally on doing something just because it would be nice. But it's a shame, right? I don't think Risk of Rain is going to be in a fantastic spot if they just keep adding content. It'll be fun to play, but it won't be a cohesive, like a well-balanced, cohesive game that really feels like it's well-designed and thought out. It will feel like a bunch of things piled on top of each other, and they're really cool things, but they're going to have less and less to do with each other. They're going to have less ways that they interact. There's going to be no void items of any void variants of any of the new items, that's for sure. I don't think there'll be. If we're lucky, we might get cooking recipes that include some of the DLC 4 items, right? We might get lucky with that. There's not going to be like new skills for old characters. I mean, if there is, you can come back to this and say, this aged like milk, Lamau. But I don't think so. I'm pretty confident in saying they're not going to change old content. Besides, maybe they'll nerf like one little thing like they did with spare drone parts. Or they'll buff something because it's relevant to the DLC. And of course, it'll be power crept. It'll be power crept, of course, because this game is just going to get easier and easier. Try playing this game without any DLC. It's harder. Don't play as a DLC character either. And you know what? Bonus challenge. Don't play with their alts. Don't play with any alternate skills. See how that feels.